Good afternoon, everyone in Japan, and good morning, everyone from Italy. Welcome to Student Conference EU Asian Market Study Platform. So we are the BAT Bat Women. That BAT stands for the first letter of our university, which is Toyo University, University of Bologna, and Aoyama Gakuin University. So not only stand for the first letter, we also stand for the diversity and also the friendship of our university. So we are the three members from a different country, Vietnam, China, and Japan. I am Fo, and I will represent for Toyo University. And Zhuojun Tang will represent for University of Bologna, and Yamamoto Michiha will represent for Aoyama Gakuin University. So today, with the topic, we would like to talk about what about migrants, which is Asian immigrant experiences in Europe during pandemic and policy advice for the future, which we would like to take Chinese immigrant in Italy as an example. So today is our contents, which we would like to start with the number one is Chinese immigrants experience in Italy during the pandemic by Zhuojun Tang.
Thank you for Zhuojun Tang from Unibo. So let me use this picture to set the tone for our presentation. On 2nd February 2020, John took the streets of Florence Historical Center, where he lives, and stood for hours, blindfolded and wearing a face mask, next to a sign that said, "I'm not a virus, I'm a human being. Eradicate the prejudice." The street stunt in Florence was designed to prove that people could still show human solidarity with the Chinese community. So what exactly did Chinese migrants, i.e. students, teachers, workers, and families undergo, and is undergoing? Next, let me tell you some stories, real first-hand stories in the past tense, but also in the present continuous. First, my story as a Chinese exchange student in Italy. The bulk of my suffering is travel restrictions, as you can imagine. In February, upon my arrival, I had a 14-day self-quarantine in Italy. And in May, when I came back to China, I endured a 14 days compulsory quarantine in Chinese hotels, paying all the accommodation fees myself, around 1,000 euros. And if you live in Bologna, you will know that my 3 months in Italy from February to May matched perfectly with the Emilia-Romagna red zone period. That is to say that 99% of my courses were remote teaching, and perhaps that 1% showed the Italian Rectors Conference didn't forget those fragile. And coming back was harder than ever before. Chinese government requires citizens to take direct flight to return. This policy reduces the risk of contagion in third transit country, but on the other hand, spawned monopoly, because the only flight from Italy to China is controlled by Italian Chinese travel agency called Blue Sky. Without free market, the flight ticket is dauntingly dear, from ordinary time 3,000 RMB to now at least 3,000 euros. And even with this price, ticket is hard to obtain, as you can see from the right photo. And not to mention my flight suspension and rebooking a third country, unaccountable swab tests, etc., of which my professor Antonio Fioli is aware of. And above all is the fear of never coming back, because once I test positive in terms of the virus, or even just the antibody, the Chinese embassy will not grant you the green code photo on the left, a prerequisite to be on board. And the second story is from a Chinese girl I met on the flight, who came from the city of Wenzhou, as many Chinese immigrants do in Italy. In the same province of Zhejiang I live in, she told me that her whole family, including her parents and her only sister, moved to Milan to earn their living by running a small Chinese canteen. Now that their eatery has been shut down for almost 2 months, worse, she and her sister never received any tertiary education, but just helped their parents with the restaurants. That is to say, they have no alternative other than low-skilled jobs, which plummeted due to the virus and digitalization. As we know, the next generation plan will cut more of those low-skilled jobs. And the third stories are from my friends, Chinese language teachers of Unibo. My friend Fei Fei told me last year, just around the outbreak of the COVID-19, she got on the bus, same bus as usual, to go back home after work in Bologna. But something unusual happened. Some white man asked her to leave the bus for the sake of other passengers. And my friend Lu was being insulted on streets in Bologna. And during epicenter, she tried wearing masks as most Chinese did, but suffered from odd looks from all Italians. Even if her Italian boyfriend Lorenzo wore mask too, when they went to supermarket Coop, all the people just glued at them, forcing them to take the mask off as a sign of, I am healthy, I don't need a mask. Next, but these stories are just too trivial compared to the next one. A 26-year-old Chinese student burned charcoal and committed suicide. His last message was a suicide note on the spot. As you can probably see, Chinese immigrants' experiences in Italy during the pandemic is teeming with physical and psychological pressure, financial problems, and discrimination. And the 4 stories I told you are just the tip of the migrants' iceberg. Next, the community of Chinese people in Italy has grown rapidly in the past 10 years. 2018 official statistics from Italian government indicate that there are at least 320,000 Chinese citizens in Italy. Although these figures do not account for former Chinese citizens who have acquired Italian nationality or Italian-born people of Chinese descent. So it is safe to infer that thousands of stories alike are out there. Next, and since the outbreak of coronavirus in China, panic has spread across Italy over fears of contagion. Chinese restaurants across the country are empty, and Chinese nationals, both locals and tourists, have been the target of racism. First came the case of a famous music school in Rome. One prestigious conservatoire suspended classes for all Chinese, Japanese, and Korean students unless they were tested for coronavirus. And the decision of the school's director was harshly criticized as discriminatory by the school's lecturers, who decided to stand against it. And in the middle is the image of a sign outside a cafe in front of the Trevi Fountain in Rome, forbidding Chinese nationals to enter due to security concerns. And this image was shared online and raised awareness on the spreading discrimination against Chinese nationals in the country. And more incidents follow in Venice and Florence, where Chinese tourists were chased, insulted, and even spat on. So this incident speaks of a spreading xenophobia in the country, a sentiment that far-right groups in the country are ready to jump on. Neo-fascist party Forza Nuova has been sticking flyers to the windows of Chinese shops and groceries in Como and Brescia in the northern region of Lombardia, saying, coronavirus, shop Italian. So, what is the truth? Next, the president of Italy's Superior Health Council, a government advisory body, said migrants' role in bringing COVID-19 back to Italy was minimal. Moreover, at the beginning of the outbreak in Italy, the Tuscan town of Prato, home to Italy's biggest single Chinese community, the opposite has been true. Once scapegoats, they were held up by authorities as a model for early strict adoption of infection control measures. Lenzo Berti, top state health official for the area, which includes Florence, said, we Italians feared that the Chinese of Prato were to be the problem. Instead, they did much better than us. Among Chinese residents in Prato, there isn't even one case of COVID contagion. Ethnic Chinese make up about a quarter of Plato's population. But Berti credits them with bringing down the entire town's infection rate to almost half the Italian average. That is to say, 62 cases per 100,000 inhabitants versus 115 for the country. So, why? Next. As Italians headed to the ski slopes and crowded into cafes and bars as normal, Plato's Chinese community, built originally around the textile industry, went into lockdown from the end of January last year, 3 weeks before Italy's first recorded infection. So the information gap between Chinese and Italians, if narrowed, could have saved many lives. So if less xenophobia, irrational phobia against the other, more talk, I am sure everything could have been better. Still, hopes are here. In an attempt to curb racism against Chinese and Asian looking, the mayor of Florence in February 2020 launched Hug a Chinese campaign. This campaign launched weeks before the first positive coronavirus emerged in Italy. It encouraged Italians to take pictures of hugging Chinese people and post them on Twitter. The mayor called for unity in this common battle and to fight the psychological terrorism that was corroborated soon after the coronavirus emerged from China's Wuhan province. And taking to Twitter, the mayor posted a video of himself, as you can see from the photo, hugging a Chinese man to spread this message. And around the world, Stop Asian Hate movement is ongoing in 2021 in response to racism against Asian Americans related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Lastly, I would like to use John's photo to end my part and show our team's stand. The reactions of passerby in Florence were reassuring and encouraging. Most looked at John with curiosity. Many hugged him and even helped him remove his face mask and blindfold. And thank you. I will leave the floor for Fo.
Thank you, Emily, for your presentation. So next, I would like to give example in EU case and Asian case. So first, let's start with EU case. So what is the big impact on migrants? So the first thing we can see that is the impact on migrants' health. Immigrants are younger than average than the native-born population, so theoretically less susceptible to develop serious health effects from COVID-19. In European OECD countries, for example, 8% of the foreign-born are over 75 years old and gets the 12% of their native peers. However, it is a well-established fact that a good group of population with socio-economic disadvantages are more likely to have bad health conditions and suffer more from chronic diseases, which can increase the risk of morbidity in the context of COVID-19. Immigrants in most OECD countries are represented among these vulnerable groups. And now let's talk about number. First, number of COVID-19 cases. Assessing to what extent COVID-19 had affected the immigrant population is changing. Basic statistics on the number and characteristics of COVID-19 cases are registered by nation health system with unofficial statistics from many sources, such as on testing and hospitalizations. What is more, not many countries will ask for immigrant status in the registered data. In some countries where this information is not available, such as United Kingdom, New Zealand. So what about the number of deaths? Let's take a look at the right hand of mine in the graph. Other measures are thus needed to better grasp the impact of COVID-19 on the immigrant population. A priori, the number of deaths from COVID-19 by origin tends to be a better measure of the impact of COVID-19 on this population. Although the country of origin is not necessary or even the information is not readily available, the share of immigrants deaths in France, in here you can see in France in the week of 10 to 19 of 2020 is compared with the share of the same periods of the year 2019. The share of the immigrant deaths in Sweden in the weeks of 10 to 19, 2020 also compared with the share of the same period for the year of 2015 to 2019. In France, between March and April 2020, assessed mortality, the difference in mortality compared with the same period in 2019 among the foreign-born was twice of that native-born. So I will give the number so you can easy to imagine. The immigrant groups were hit the worst by the excess mortality were from North Africa, which is plus 55.4%. That's compared to the same period in 2019. Sub-Saharan Africa plus 114%, and Asia is like 91% compared with only 22 assessed mortality from the native-born. Higher assessed mortality for immigrants were even observed among the youngest cohorts. Immigrant assessed mortality remained twice to 4 times as much as that for native-born, even after taking into account that foreigner-born are more likely to live in distant polyplay areas that were more affected by the pandemic. So the second impact that we can see not only the immigrants and migrants, but also the impact on the education for the children of them. The progressively comprehensive closure of schools across OECD countries have made online learning opportunity critical for education at all levels. Although schools are better equipped with digital tools than ever before, access to digital learning opportunities is still not equal. Why? Because children of immigrants tend to be less equipped to face this new transition. So you can see this graph here is more OECD country with significant shares of children in immigrants. Students with immigrant parents are less likely than students with native-born parents at the age of 15 to have access to computer and internet connection at home. However, children with immigrant parents tend to overrepresented among those low economic, social, and cultural status compared to those who native born. In Denmark, Slovenia, Iceland, and Greece, more than half of children of immigrants aged 15 were among the bottom of the economic, social, and cultural status index. So you can see that this data I gave you is not now, it is in 2018. However, at this situation in this pandemic, online learning reinforced the role of the family in supporting student learning. Students with immigrant parents tend to have parents with, on average, lower education and poorer socioeconomic resources, and who may have a lower understanding of the education system. So what about Asia case? So in Asia case, I would like to use Vietnamese immigrants in Japan. So the first thing we can see after the pandemic is the job loss. So following to a survey by the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare in Japan, as of October 2019, about more than 400,000 Vietnamese are working in Japan, but many have lost their job due to the effects of the new coronavirus. So due to the job loss, it leads to a criminal increasing. Most of the cases caught by police pointed out that they financial issues due to job loss and unable to go back to the country. So you can see at the picture here, I have screenshot from Asahi Shimbun, which is a very famous newspaper in Japan. It said that some Vietnamese trainees didn't have money to go back to their country. Therefore, they have to stole somebody peer in the garden to make living. And also the same case that Vietnamese student, stole some farmer watermelon in his own garden at Aichi Prefecture. So due to the coronavirus and job loss, people visa expired, they couldn't go back to the country. So from legal immigrants, they just had become illegal immigrants. So next, I would like to invite Michiha to talk about comparison with migrant policy in Japan.
Okay, thank you, Fu. For my part, I'd like to talk about Japanese policies for foreign workers and current situation in the COVID-19 pandemic. Then I'm going to talk about suggestions for the future. Next, please. Could you go to the next? Thank you. First of all, I'm going to talk about this program. A technical internship program for foreigners has been introduced by the Japanese government, and a lot of foreign workers have applied this program and come to Japan to get a job since its program started in 1993. However, some problems have occurred in the COVID situation. First, some of employees were forced to lose their jobs due to economic deterioration. But, however, if they want to go back to their home country, they would have other difficulties. Some foreign nationals have been stuck in Japan longer than expected as a result, such as strict quarantine rules in their home country or a lack of plane flights. The Japanese government changed its regulation in some content, but it has been criticized by labor activists sometimes, and they say that these people who lost their jobs or had only short stay visa would not be available on either health insurance or welfare support at this time. Could you turn to the next slide, please? Thank you. Next, I will show you other support from the government. Last year, 2020, the Japanese government has announced that they will be handing out 100,000 Japanese yen to all residents in Japan for economic support during the coronavirus outbreak. Every person listed on Japan's basic resident register as of April 2020 will receive 100,000 yen, regardless of their nationalities. In this case, some problems are also argued. First, the application procedure is very difficult and complicated for people who are not very good at Japanese language. And moreover, short-term and temporary residents and illegal migrants are not covered by this government's financial support. And unemployed people who cannot return to their home countries would suffer from poverty. Okay, next, I'd like to talk about suggestions that some experts said for improving Japanese policies for foreign workers. And it might be useful to think about policies in Europe and other Asian countries. First, about health insurance and welfare support. It is important to create the chance to access to hospitals and public health support, even though they are short-stay workers. Second, about permanent resident. If the government set a program with permanent resident status, foreign workers would get a chance to stable job. Third is about both for people in host country and from foreign countries. Some experts pointed out that in Japan, some essential industries such as agriculture and nursing care have difficulty in recruiting Japanese workers because of its low salaries, low payment for them, and other disadvantages of its job. And it has been creating a need for foreign workers. And it is said that in order to fundamentally solve the problem, it is necessary to establish a better set of working conditions and environment to make it comfortable for both workers in the host country and workers from foreign countries. That's all for my part. And next, we will talk more about policies.
Thank you, Michiha. So we had listened about Chinese immigrant in Italy. We listened about Vietnamese immigrants in Japan policy. So it's time to take actions. So I would like to talk about actions for policymakers. Immigrants and their children have been affected by the initial phase of pandemic and are likely to continue to be highly affected, both with respect to health and integration outcomes. This has followed a period of high immigration inflows and better integration outcomes for immigrants across a range of indicators. As the crisis continues in its negative impact, it is urgent to prevent the pandemic from turning into an integration crisis. To this end, we suggest a few options. First is to monitor the situation of immigrants and their children regarding health, employment, and education to better identify the issues and the appropriate policy response. Second is ensure access of immigrants to testing and treatment for COVID-19 in order to alleviate impact on migrants' health. While many countries have taken efforts to remove such barriers such as Vietnam, in order which our needs to step up and remain financial or legal access barrier removed, especially in countries where testing is still limited. And third is to raise the awareness of discrimination and reforms anti-discrimination measures. As labor markets impact on the pandemic risk, increasing discrimination against immigrants and their children. And last but not least, make sure that economic and employment support measures do reach migrants, include both workers and self-employed. This implies not only formal access but also information and reach out to these groups. Finally, it's now more important than ever to bear in mind that integration is an investment. Lack of investment today will lead to a long-term negative integration prospect on migrants, especially in many especially in many recent arrival in the next generation, which is the Nguyen. So I would like to borrow a rated writer on time J.K. Rowling words. We are all human. Every human life is worth the same and worth saving. Thank you for your listening.